Hi, welcome to my talk. My name is Carolina Ocampo, and today I'll tell you a bit about the opportunities for social and biological diversity offered by cacao agroforestry systems. So cacao production has a bittersweet side that is well known. At the farm level, there are issues with deforestation, biodiversity loss, and as a consequence, an increase in pests and diseases. For producers, there are unfair payments for labor, there is poor inclusion of women and young generations, and there are issues with the infrastructure that farmers have for processing cacao once it is harvested. And then at the market level, there is also a very large demand which is hard to meet. There is a poor access to the market for farmers, and there are ever-growing international standards that are hard to meet. But we want to do it right, no? So both from academia, from science, and from practice, we are trying to find solutions to all of these issues. So here I have just some examples of papers that have explored solutions of how to combine better agroforestry management strategies and landscape characteristics with biodiversity maintenance, and also on how to identify the main needs of producers and buyers and to address them in the best way. And there are both strategies and initiatives from local countries and also from private companies to address this. So I have here, for example, the German Initiative on Sustainable Cocoa. There are also worldwide initiatives for this, and there are also private companies that have created their own labels as this Cocoa Life. And what we have learned from all these proposals is that a solution must be global. It must tackle several issues at the same time. So it must be science-based, it must be addressed at a large scale, and it must include multiple stakeholders. And this is what Garibaldi and collaborators proposed in 2019, that we include multiple levels of biodiversity and all the possible stakeholders to solve at the same time social, economic, and biodiversity issues. And this is what we try to do in our project. We are studying mostly native cacao agroforestry and how it can be used as a sustainable alternative for diversity. And we have been doing this in Peru because it holds a large diversity of everything. So there is a large cacao diversity. It is the center of origin and the center of diversification of cacao. 75% of the cacao that Peru exports is considered fine in flavor, so it has very high quality standards. It is also a very biodiverse country. It holds one of the largest bird diversities in the world, and cacao is grown in different ecosystems, not only in rainforests. And also the smallholders are very diverse in terms of age, whether they are associated or not, the management strategies that they use in their plantations, and the fact that young generations are very interested in creating business related to cacao. So our project diversifies native fine and flavor cacao production to enhance productivity and income, and we do it studying the three aspects that I have mentioned so far. So at the farm level, we study biodiversity. Today I will tell you a bit about my doctoral thesis project, which focuses on flying vertebrates and pest control ecosystem services. We have also been tackling topics of inclusion at the producer level, which I will mention, how to include more women in the production chain, and how to meet the diversity of cacao and producers with the buyers. So how to connect either independent producers or cooperatives as Norandino with the needs of buyers. And here are the main methods that we use to study biological and social diversity. We selected two study regions that were very contrasting. On one hand, we have the tropical dry forests in Piura, which are very seasonal, very dry. Cacao needs irrigation in these places. And on the other hand, we have Cusco, which has one of the largest cacao diversities. It is part of the center of diversification of cacao, and it is dominated by subtropical forests. And so we studied birds and bats with point counts in the case of birds and mist netting service in the case of bats, and we analyzed how bird and bat diversity changed with the position of the forests, so the distance between the agroforests and the forest, and with seasonality. And we compared these patterns for the birds between the two landscapes, so between the dry tropical forest and the subtropical forest. And for the social diversity, we performed a series of surveys and we created 9 focal groups of women and young cacao producers to identify what their main challenges are. And then we also contacted over 75 fine and flavor cacao buyers of different nationalities and tried to understand what their needs were in terms of cacao flavors, cacao amounts, and cacao processing. What are the main results that we have found so far? So, first of all, in tropical dry forests, we found that the presence of birds changed with season. So the birds benefited from cacao mostly in the dry season. We found that bird abundance increased with distance to forests in the dry season, which is when the resources are most scarce in the forest. But on the other hand, we found that bats benefit from cacao permanently. So we found in both seasons that the species richness of bats increased in cacao agroforests that were far from the forests. And moreover, the number of insectivorous bats also increased in those forests, in those agroforests. And this gives a very important message for the value of cacao agroforestry for flying vertebrates, and it also gives a very positive message about the availability of pest control ecosystem services in cacao. If we have more insectivorous bats, there is likely a better control of these pests. But we also found that these patterns were unique to the tropical dry forest, so we also performed the bird studies in the subtropical forests of Cusco and found there completely different patterns. So we found that bird species richness didn't change that much, and the functional traits of the birds changed a lot. And what this means is that conservation management strategies for cacao must be developed according to the local traits of the biological communities and to the specific ecosystem and landscape that you are studying. And from our conversations with farmers, we identified 3 main issues. So the first issue is related to gender. 25% of the producers in Peru are women, but they are mostly regarded as having only a supportive or domestic role in cacao production. And this keeps a very large knowledge untapped. Women hold traditional knowledge of how to process cacao, especially parts of cacao that are not typically used, as the cacao pulp. So the project has been trying to include women more and train them in cacao processing. We also found an issue with age, and is that groups of different ages have very divergent priorities, and this is related to their access to secondary education. So younger generations are more worried about improving in the business, whereas older generations are more worried about keeping their independence as producers. And this means that there is probably a poor generational replacement, as younger generations don't necessarily want to be involved in the cacao agroforestry process. The third topic is cacao genetics. So the large diversity of cacao in Peru is not explored enough. We don't know the clear flavor profiles of the native varieties, and then it's hard to connect the diversity that producers have in their farm with the needs of the market. But the good thing is that these issues can be tackled simultaneously in a way, so younger generations can be trained for other stages of cacao, and then their additional training can be used to maximize sustainability of the business. So the idea is that after our conversations with buyers, we identified that they require very specific flavor profiles. And once those profiles are identified, we can create long-term relationships between buyers and farmers. And these long-term relationships are very positive because they ensure a stable and long-lasting income for the farmers. Then they can use more of the resources to improve independent cacao processing and nature conservation. We have examples here in the figure. Farmers have been able to create processing plants and also create restoration projects using this additional money. So the take-home messages are: cacao agroforests can offer multiple alternatives for diversification. There are challenges but also opportunities for pairing forest conservation and sustainable cacao. We need the skills of women and younger generations, and especially the reality is diverse. We need to improve social and biological diversity, taking into account the local conditions of each place. That is it for now. Thank you for watching. We have many people to thank: the farmers, our field assistants, our students, and I invite you to also visit the poster by Justine Van Singel, which focuses on cacao pollination services in Peru. Thank you, and I look forward to our question and answer session.